All right, now, when you're setting this up, what you want to do first, and again, if it's something you don't need to tear apart all the time unless you just like putting everything back in all those fancy little cutouts, take this long hose with the valve on it. Find your arrow. Okay, this is telling me direction of flow is this way. So I know this side is going to come over here to my refrigerant. So I'm going to go ahead and hook that up. Now the other side, this is your valve that you're going to meter the refrigerant into the unit from. So screw the other side here, and this is going to go on this port that we added by putting the T. I'm trying to keep all this kind of where you can see. We're going to put it right here. All right. Now, this is your charging hose. They wanted to make sure we weren't using super long hoses, so this is going to go on my low side, and you can take this off unless you have a dedicated set of R600 manifold that you're going to use all the time there. Now, I'm going to pick up my yellow hose and put it at the bottom of the T. And I haven't got this super tight just for the demonstration. Now this hose would come over to my vacuum and my micron gauge. So I'm going to go ahead and attach it over here. Okay, now I'm not getting into how to set up everything, but guys, y'all know that coming off your vacuum pump, you go to your micron gauge, you need a valve to take the pump out of place. So as you're checking to see, did your 500 micron vacuum, it rose up to 700 and that was it, or whatever. We've talked about that in every other video. Nothing's changed. Just make sure you've got an isolation valve before the micron gauge. So right now I have vacuum pump, isolation valve, micron gauge, coming up to my manifold set. I have a shutoff right here. So when I'm through with this micron gauge, I'm going to turn this off. I could actually remove the hose if I wanted to make sure I don't have anything in the way. But the whole idea is when I get that vacuum and I've verified it held under 1,000, I can kill this. And the reason I want this killed is when I go to charge, if you don't put a valve here, you're going to put refrigerant through the manifold, but you're also going to put it in this hose all the way down to your isolation valve, which means you're putting positive pressure on a micron gauge, which is not a good thing to do. And that's just more refrigerant you've got in all these lines that you're going to have to let the unit suck out later. So kill this. All right, now, and this is what we covered up to through page 7, page 8. All right, before we go any further, I'm going to set this aside and we're going to talk about these valve core depressors. Now, the way these are designed is so that you're not going to get refrigerant coming through. These actually, when you screw them down, depending on how far you've screwed them, you're either depressing the valve core or you're not. So this allows you to have a shutoff that when you're done and you close that valve core off, you can unscrew this with no loss of refrigerant. Because you're going to basically, when you're through, you're going to back this out a little bit and it's going to take the pressure off the valve core and you're now isolated from the system. If you lost any refrigerant, it'd be whatever could fit in this tiny little space between here and this here. So we're going to demonstrate how these work real quick. All right, we're going to talk about these. Now, these valve core depressors, the way you need to use them is first, rotate counterclockwise all the way out till they stop. Now, to prove to you what's happening here, I have hooked up a Schrader valve to some nitrogen. Get a little more pressure here so you can hear me. So if I push the Schrader, you can hear the nitrogen. So let's say you're going on a system, it's got refrigerant in it. You take this with the knob turned all the way out counterclockwise, and there is no Schrader pin in here. When I screw this on to my system, which I'm demonstrating with the nitrogen, nothing happens. Because with this all the way back, my Schrader depressor is way up here. Now, once I've got all my hoses hooked up and I want to get into the system, all I have to do is screw this down, and I'm now in the system. I'm going to use my finger to shut it off. So after I'm through charging my system, all I have to do is back this all the way out. It's removed the Schrader pin. Now when I unscrew off the Schrader, there's no loss of refrigerant. They found out these lasted longer and had less problems with it than the pop-off quick connects. But it's just a different way to get in and out of a live system, either one you're diagnosing or one you've just charged, with no loss of refrigerant. Okay. All right, now, let's say we're going to do our job. You've seen I have this all hooked up. So what we need to do now is, first off, close our manifold set. They're closed. Get your high side, and you can do this one of two ways, guys. I mean, I'm just going to use a dryer with a Schrader to represent my high side. I can either, with this backed all the way off, I can screw into this now, or I could screw the hose onto it and do it. Whatever's simpler for you. But go ahead and get one of your Schrader pin depressors on your high side, whether it's a temporary access port or you've put a new dryer in, and connect this to it. So now I'm into my high side. You're going to do the same with your dryer. Now all I've done is put a port here. This is a new compressor, and I didn't want to mess it up. So I'm going to put this on here. Again, you're going to need to make sure this is all the way out, and I'm going to put it on. And then now I'm going to use my short charging hose and attach it here. Now, we're going to evacuate the system. So what we're wanting to do is start with these closed. We are going to want to run this down. So I'm opening the depressor, or the Schrader pin, by depressing it. So I'm going to only need to run it about 1 or 2 revolutions, get it open. And I'm going to do the same over here, get it open. Now we're back to here. I want to open my manifold set. I want to open my valve going to my vacuum pump. And remember, I didn't cut the refrigerant on. I want to make sure this valve is open. So now, when I start up the vacuum pump, I'm going to be pulling a vacuum to here, through this hose to here, through these hoses to the low and high side of my machine. I'm going to pull down till I get under 500 micron vacuum. I'm going to isolate my pump. I'm going to make sure it stays under 1,000. Once that has happened, at that point, I'm at 675. I'm going to come up to this port, and I am going to close off the yellow line going to my vacuum pump. I am going to close off this port going to my charging station. Now, I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to turn my scale on. I'm going to let it come on and tell me all this little fancy stuff. I'm going to have to get it off these wrinkles here so I can get it flat. And I'm going to zero it. I've got 0.00. I'm going to put this back on it. I'm going to zero it, make sure it stays. Once I've got it zeroed, I'm going to lift this up and open this valve. I'm going to set it back down on the scale in the same place I got it from. You'll see anywhere from 9 to 14 grams have gone from here, but they've stopped right here. Now, LG does not charge on the high side with R600. In fact, it's suggested you use, with LG, we're telling you charge on the low side. So guys, before I even mess with this, I would have disconnected my high side. But since I forgot, now that my vacuum's done, I could go ahead and shut this, and I could take and run this all the way out, which totally breaks me away from the system, and then take my discharge valve off. And that's just one less piece of equipment I'm having to look at. Take that off, move that. And I'm not going to pick up anything because I don't want to bounce my hoses around. So at this point, the only thing tied in is this manifold's open. And when I start letting refrigerant in, it's going to come into this. But since I've got the manifold shut, it's not going to run down this hose. Since I've got this valve shut, it's not going to run back here. It's only going to go into my manifold and down here to my refrigerator. So at this point, we're taught, put about half your charge in the unit. Once you get half the charge in the unit, unplug your grounding strap, plug the refrigerator back in, let it come on. Then, using this valve, very carefully, continue to bump the refrigerant in till you hit your exact charge. Let's just say it was 60 grams. Once I hit 60 grams, I'm going to stop. But I'm not through, because the refrigerant that I first filled this line with is counted in that 60 grams. So once I've hit 60, in this example, I'm going to lift this up and I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to set this down. It doesn't have to go back on the scale. You can if you want, but at that point, I'm done weighing things. Then I'm going to open this up, and let the compressor suck all the refrigerant from this line. And when I finally get it all in, I'm going to leave this open. It's going to begin pulling a vacuum on this, because remember, R600 runs in a vacuum. So what I'm going to do is watch my gauges, because every time I open this, my low side pressure is going to go up. Then when I shut it, it's going to start sucking it back down into a vacuum. And once I've got all my charge in, and I see it get down about 10, 15 inches of vacuum, I'm going to go ahead and reach over here and run this all the way out. And that's going to take my gauges out of the system. And at that point, I can now unscrew from the system, not have any refrigerant leak out, and I'm done. At this point, I need to put caps here and here and let the lady know that the unit is now fixed, ready to rock and roll. All right? So guys, even though this new kit is a little bit different, it's not that much different. The biggest thing is a T and a shutoff have to be added to your manifold system, and then the rest of what I've talked about. If you have any questions, please contact me here at the training department. My name's Dan. Be safe out there.